If you want to get really good at JavaScript, the most important thing to understand is the function. It's a multi-paradigm language that supports functional programming patterns. Remember, functions are just objects, which means they can be used as variables and passed around to other functions. In this video, we'll talk about higher order functions and the related terminology that you need to understand. First of all, there's two main ways to define a function. When you start with the function keyword, you're creating a function declaration or statement. What's special about this is that a statement will always be hoisted up to the top of the file, which means if you define a function down at the bottom, you can still use it or reference it anywhere else in that file. The other option is to create a function expression, which in this case would be setting the function equal to a variable. In this case, the function is not created till it's encountered in the code, which means any code defined above it cannot reference that function. But now you might be wondering, which one should I use in my code? Well, most of the time, there's no significant difference between the two, and either approach will work. As a general rule, I use function declarations if I consider it a global function, whereas I'll use function expressions if I want it to be scoped to a certain part of a module or file. It's also important to know that expressions can be anonymous, which means you can use them as arguments to functions without giving them a name. Now it's time to talk about higher order functions, which is just a function that either takes a function as an argument or returns a function. Often in writing JavaScript code, you'll be dealing with callbacks. Let's take a look at a simple example. Here we have a function that takes a callback as an argument. We simply call a callback with whatever arguments we want here. Now we can take our function expression and pass it as an argument to that function. That's a very common pattern that you'll see in JavaScript, but in many cases, it's not even necessary to name the function that's going in as the argument. Developers often prefer to use anonymous functions or arrow functions. With an arrow function, we can define the function logic here directly inside the parentheses, which can often be a more efficient way of doing things. The other type of higher order function that you should be aware of is a function that returns a new function. As you can see here, the function body returns a new function, which means when we call it, we get a function value back. And now we can use it elsewhere in the application. The bottom line is that higher order functions are actually very simple, but you'll see them used in very complex ways throughout the language.